After Pina and a number of short films on the subject of architecture, I was ready to go for the ultimate test of the 3D language. Was it able to tell stories? I mean, I was pretty convinced that it was a great tool for dancing and architecture, and I think we had showed that. But still, all the films I had done so far had been documentary in nature, so the world was there, and 3D was a medium to seize it and enter into it, and it had a great capacity to do so if you used it gently. But if you were able to tell a story, that was a whole different issue, because in a story you create a world of your own, and if it could do that, I wasn't sure. I was hoping. And my hope was based, as I told you, on these close-ups in Pina, more than on anything else. In the architectural films, some of that propensity of the closeness to people and of their presence, in some of that propensity hadn't shown up in the architectural films, but because probably the intention had been rather to discover those buildings, so, and people, and especially in the fictional context, had not appeared. So I was still in the dark whether it was possible, and the films that existed didn't help much, because of course Avatar was a great story and storytelling, even if the story was stolen from the world. But Terence told me yesterday that also his story was stolen. And so he didn't have any grudge against James Cameron. So stories, of course, get perpetuated. So these stories in the American application of storytelling in 3D didn't really help me that much, because after all, the main intention was the sensation of the language and not the language itself. And everything I saw didn't really make me feel sure that storytelling was possible. But then again, I wanted to do it and try it. And while we did the architectural series, we already started to work on this film called Everything Will Be Fine, that I'll show you right away. But let me just tell you a little bit before it, because it is a story, after all, related to these films that you've already seen. When I was in the editing room for Pina, I got somebody sent me a script. And normally, well, I get lots of scripts, I must admit. And I try to read them, but very often I read the first 10 pages and then I realize I don't have to read the rest. But that's the way it is. The scripts of my students, I do read them to the end, but the scripts that people send me, I feel obliged to read the beginning, and when I think it's anything to it, then I finish it. So I got this script. I wasn't quite sure why somebody sent it to my home address. I was a little pissed off to begin with. But I looked at it and didn't really pay attention. I didn't remember the name. I started to read it, and then I thought, wait a minute, this is damn good. Who sent me this, and why does he send it to my home address? And I read the name again on the front, Björn Olaf Johannesson, and then it dawned on me that I knew the man. Because a few years earlier I had been at the Sundance Festival and had taken part in the Sundance Lab for scriptwriters. And I was the president of a jury to read lots of script and select one, and that one script got an award of $100,000, which was a lot of dough. Not for the scriptwriter, but in order to, as an initial funding for the film. So at the time we had given the award to a young Norwegian writer and his Flemish director, a woman director, and And they actually, and it was by far the best script at the time. It was called Nowhere Man, like the Beatles song. And it was by far the best script, and we gave them this $100,000 award. And I told the young writer at the time, if ever you have another script as good, send it to me. Not because I ever considered doing films after scripts that have been sent, but sometimes I can help people. And I've developed all my films on my own, with only a handful of exceptions, not even. So I had given him my address because I felt this was a great talent and maybe I could help him. I actually then helped producing this film, Nowhere Man, and it was made, and it was a beautiful film, but with a handicap that they decided to shoot it in Flemish, and that limited its distribution, unfortunately, horrendously. But it was a lovely film. And this writer was very talented. And when I remembered him, I finished, of course, the script, and at the end of the script, I thought, well, this is just what I've been waiting for. This is the script that I can use in order to tell a story. And I was sort of grateful that it had come to me on its own, because I was in the middle of editing Pina, and I don't write when I'm editing. So I felt this was a godsend, and I could probably, with the help of the script, go into the adventure of shooting a film in 3D. I showed the script to my assistant and to my production partner, who does all the financing with me. And they all loved it just as much as I did, so we bought an option. And that was in 2010. That film, Everything Will Be Fine, when I first got it, was written for nowhere. It was a story that started in the winter, and I won't tell you the story because you're going to see it. But I wrote the writer back that we wanted to buy it, and that he was overjoyed when I said I'm considering to do this myself. He was very happy, and we then started to work together on this script. It took us 2 years until we got it into a shape that we can start financing with. And especially that it had a location. Because it was really written for nowhere. In a way, he wrote it for Norway, but even there it didn't have any names attached to towns. And he knew it couldn't be shot in Norway. So the first thing he said, I know the script is anonymous, and I know that you certainly want to find a real place to set it in. And in my first reading of it, I was sure I knew the place already, and that was Quebec and Montreal. You might see that in the course of the film. So from the beginning, I felt very sure that I knew where this story had to take place. Altogether, I traveled to Montreal in Canada 5 times, spent months and months there in order to really find the place and the locations that where the film really belonged to, and then even had the writer come and write with me in Canada. So the film was deeply rooted in that landscape and in the city of Montreal. Took a long time, because considering I got the script in 2010 and we bought the option right away, we could only shoot it then at the end of 2003 and in the beginning of 2004. It needed several seasons, so we had to shoot it summer and fall, and then winter, spring. And casting also took a long time, and that's why I had to wait for quite some time in order to make this acid test for me, not for everybody else, but for me, if storytelling in 3D was possible. In these architectural films and also in Pina, I felt there was one drawback for storytelling, and you might remember those films in Pina. There was this overall focus. And most of, actually all 3D films, or almost all of them in their entirety, are shot with the philosophy that focus has to be from here to there, all over. And I felt that for storytelling and for an ease of getting into a story, I felt it was utterly necessary to to work with the depth of field. And but everybody told me I shouldn't. Also Josephine warned me and said it's difficult, depth of field, things out of focus. The eye doesn't quite know what to do there in 3D. I said, no, let's test. So we tested very, very often. I actually shot a short film with 3 real actors to test my theory that one could throw 3D into a world of more familiar images in terms of regular cinema, where you were used to having seeing characters and background out of focus. Not all the time, of course. In a wide shot, everything is in focus, but on a close-up, in our habits of watching movies, the world behind is not in focus. And 3D so far had always been shot with a wide range of focus. So we tested a long time, tested with a little longer lenses than we had used for the films so far, because if you use a wide angle, it's very hard to get any out of focus afterwards, and for doing close-ups, a wide angle is utterly unpleasant, especially for ladies' faces, but also for men, and they distort, and you don't want to have somebody close in front of your camera and shooting with a wide angle. That's why the actors, dancers in Pina sat at a distance, so we always shot them here, because they didn't distort. If you go closer on such a lens, you do distort. And that's why the only close-up, the reverse angle on the big man on the stage, was also shot on a longer lens. And that's the only time I ever used a longer lens on a 3D. So I felt it would also help to do something necessary on 3D, which was to feel the space a little bit more between people and background. And in most, actually in all 3D films, I thought there was something lacking. You didn't really feel the air between people and their background like you did in regular films. Somehow, also in our own vision and with our own eyes, the in-between, especially if there's nothing, is palpable. And you feel the air, and in 3D very often I felt it was like space was interrupted, and then space continued when there was something. And so I hope that with a slight compression, and by trying to throw background sometimes out of focus, we could have more of a presence of space and of air in between people and things. So we tested that extensively, and so eventually we then started to shoot. Not going to tell you more. Everything will be fine. Got finished this February. We really had to rush it to be able to show it at the Venice Film Festival. When the festival started, we're still recording the music. The composer is one, if you have seen some of Terry's films, you've seen. Alexandre Alexandre Desplat has done one of Terrence's films. The
Tree of Life.
Tree of Life, exactly. So this is it now, and we can see afterwards. And I think our real discussion really starts afterwards. So now you've seen it. What my consequence in storytelling was in terms of this new language of 3D. You might have understood why I went for the script and the story of a man for whom the entire world is material for his writing, and who doesn't really have a relationship except that everything is material. And in the terms of my dear Martin Buber, for him the world is only exists in the I-it relationship. And the film and the story is very much about this man learning to let something enter him and learning to accept somebody, and that's only a beginning, as a you. And obviously I hope that this man, Thomas, after this, when this film continues, or the story continues, for the rest of his life, will lead a different life and will have a different openness for people, and this young man can at any given moment knock at his door. So that's why I choose the story, because I felt so much in this story is happening inside a man, that the propensity of 3D to look into a soul and to see so much more might have its place. And that's why I cast James Franco and the other people, because I really asked them to only try to be and not try to act. But all questions evolving from that is something I'd like to discuss with you, because the thing is that as much as I feel I've achieved something with the film in terms of 3D and storytelling, as much as I think I know a little bit more now what this medium can do. It is also, in a strange way, to be considered as a failure for me, because the immersement that the film brings about is something that not many people can deal with. And as much as I had a lot of people who were moved by the film, audiences in general didn't come, and the trade, the film business, rejected the film in a furious way. When the trade press saw the film in Berlin, we had such bad reviews of it and such vicious rejection that the next day no distributor worldwide bought the film. So the film is now only seen in the countries that co-produced it: Canada, France, Germany, and Scandinavia. Nobody else bought it, because they so viciously rejected it and recommended to anybody not to even touch it. And it turned out that their function, trade press, is really PR for the studios, and they felt that the use of this language was of no interest for the film business. And that's why this film, as of now, is dead. But at the same time, I didn't feel I failed, because I think in terms of what the medium can do, I was able to find out more. But if maybe I went overboard with that story, that is another question. And maybe the story was, in a way, too immersing, and therefore almost too dangerous for this medium. That I'd like to discuss with you.